July 1943. 11:45 a.m., a U.S. Army prisoner of war camp somewhere in dusty Texas. The heat presses down like a hand on the camp's corrugated roofs, but inside the long wooden mess hall, it is almost cool. A line of German prisoners shuffles forward, boots scuffing on the boards, the smell of real food drifting out toward them. For many of them, this is the first time they have been indoors and unshackled since they were captured in North Africa. At the front of the line stands Gefreiter Karl Weber, 24 years old, former Afrika Korps infantryman. His field-grey tunic hangs loose on his shoulders. Weeks of captivity and the Atlantic crossing have carved sharp lines into his face. In his pocket is a creased photograph of his parents' small shop in Cologne. His fingers keep going to it, almost on their own, as if checking that some part of his old life is still there. Ahead, American soldiers in neat khaki uniforms laugh and joke, ladles dipping into steaming metal trays. Karl lifts his head and tries to make sense of what he's seeing. Back in Tunisia, before the surrender, they had listened to the propaganda officers. Americans were decadent, brutal, obsessed with money and luxury. German POWs, they were warned, would be starved, beaten, humiliated. You can almost hear those briefings still echoing in the back of Karl S.'s mind as the line inches forward. He smells roasted meat, something like real potatoes, even a faint sweetness he cannot place. His empty stomach twists. This is not the stench of a starvation camp. This smells like Sunday lunch used to smell, before the rationing began. A sergeant with a U.S. Army military police armband walks down the line, counting heads, checking that each prisoner has his metal tray. His tone is firm, but not cruel. "Keep it moving, fellas," he calls to the Americans behind the counter. "We've got another 100 coming in after this batch." The German men glance at one another. Another 100? Another full hall of prisoners, all to be fed like this? The numbers do not match what they have been told about a collapsing, chaotic America. Doctrine and reality are already starting to clash. Karl reaches the serving counter. The heat from the food pans hits his face. An American cook, sweat on his brow, looks up at him and offers the smallest of nods. Without a word, the ladle drops a thick scoop of mashed potatoes onto his tray, then a generous slice of meatloaf. Gravy runs to the edges of the metal. Karl's mind races. This is already more than he has seen on a single plate in months. His hands tremble slightly as he adjusts his grip. You can almost feel the weight of the tray pulling at his sore arms. Then, almost casually, another GI steps sideways in front of him. This one is young, maybe 19, with a broad, easy grin. In one hand he holds a large, stainless steel scoop resting in a deep pan of chalk-white ice. He digs in, twists his wrist, and drops a perfect ball of ice cream onto the corner of Karl's tray. The cold dessert hisses for a moment against the hot metal. The German prisoner freezes. He stares down at the melting scoop, then up at the American's face, trying to see the trick. Ice cream, in a prisoner of war camp. Before Karl can speak, the line nudges him forward. At the end of the counter, there is a wooden crate filled with glass bottles. Their labels are unfamiliar, but the script is clear. Coca-Cola. An American private flicks off the metal caps one after another, glass clinking on glass, passing the bottles out to the prisoners as if this were the most normal thing in the world. One is pressed into Karl's free hand. It is cold. Condensation beads on the dark glass. Somewhere behind him, a German voice mutters a prayer under its breath. Somewhere ahead, another man begins to laugh. A short, disbelieving laugh that borders on hysteria. Karl steps into the hall itself now, blinded for a second by the contrast of light. The noise hits him, the clatter of cutlery, the low murmur of English, bursts of American laughter, the scrape of benches on wooden floors. Long tables are already crowded with other POWs and guards, all eating from identical trays. No one is being beaten. No one is on the floor. In the center of the hall, an American officer pauses, watching the newcomers with a thoughtful expression, as if wondering how this scene looks through their eyes. Karl hesitates, his tray heavy with food he never thought he would see again. His hand wrapped around a bottle of a drink he has only heard rumors of. In that moment, with the smell of warm gravy and cold sugar in the air, a quiet realization begins to form. Not yet words, not yet fully shaped, just a question that refuses to go away. If this is how the enemy treats its prisoners, what does that say about its strength? And what does it say about everything he has been told? Karl sits down at the end of a long wooden bench, across from men he barely knows. Some are fellow Afrika Korps soldiers from his own regiment. Others are naval ratings captured at sea. No one speaks at first. Trays clatter onto the table. The ice cream glistens and slowly softens. Bottles of Coca-Cola stand between them, like strange little glass trophies. The air hums with the constant background noise of an army at lunch. Somewhere, a radio plays faint swing music, cutting in and out under the murmur of conversation. He picks up the bottle first. The cap is already off. He sniffs it, suspicious. It smells sweet, like nothing he has ever tasted. For a second, he imagines poison, some elaborate American trick. But then he catches the eye of a U.S. guard at the end of the table, a tall man from Ohio or Kansas or some other place Karl has only seen on maps. The guard is drinking the same thing, from the same bottle. Their eyes meet. The American raises his drink a little, as if in a casual toast, then takes a long pull. No one collapses. No one dies. Karl brings the glass to his own lips. The first sip is a shock. Ice cold, biting with bubbles, overwhelmingly sweet. It fizzes in his mouth, in the back of his throat. For a moment, he is no longer in a camp in Texas. He is 12 years old again, sneaking a sugar cube from the tea jar in his mother's kitchen before the shortages began. It is such a simple thing, but it hits him harder than any speech ever could. You can almost feel every propaganda poster on every German wall crumble a little in that instant. Across from him, a sergeant from Bremen stares down at his own tray, hands hovering, eyes narrowed. "This is impossible," he mutters in German. "They must be trying to make us talk." The man next to him, an older corporal with grey in his hair, shrugs slowly. "Talk about what?" "We already lost Africa," he says. "They have our officers, they have our maps. What is left to give them?" He takes a bite of the ice cream, his expression changing from grim to stunned childlike pleasure in less than a second. The others watch, then follow, spoons scraping metal. At another table, an American cook leans against a support beam, taking a short break. His name is Private Joe Mason, 21, from Indiana. He watches the German prisoners eat, wiping his hands on a stained apron. To him, it is just another lunch shift. But even he cannot help noticing the way some of the prisoners are looking around, not with hatred, not quite, but with the wary eyes of men who have stepped into a different world. He remembers the briefing they got when the first POWs arrived. Treat them according to the Geneva Convention, feed them well, keep order, no abuse. "We're not them," the lieutenant had said. "We do this right." Joe glances at the stacks of food behind the counter, sacks of flour, tins of meat, boxes of powdered milk, crates of bottled soda. It is a lot, even by American standards, and this is just one camp, one mess hall, one lunch. Somewhere beyond the wire, across this continent, entire cities are producing more. More food, more uniforms, more trucks, more planes. The thought crosses his mind briefly. If the Germans can see this, really see it, what must they be thinking about their chances now? Back at the table, Karl keeps eating long after his hunger is gone. He's not eating now because he is starving. He is eating because every bite feels like proof that the stories he was told about a weak, collapsing America were lies. One of the men beside him, a former tank crewman, leans in and whispers, "If this is what they give prisoners, imagine what their own soldiers get at the front." That lands like a stone in Karl's stomach. He pictures the thin rations on the Tunisian line. He pictures the fuel drums always half empty, the trucks that never arrived. He looks up and studies the room more carefully. The Americans move with an easy confidence. Their uniforms are clean. Their belts are new leather, not cracked and patched. The electric lights burn bright without blackout shades. On one wall hangs a large hand-drawn map of the world, with coloured pins marking fronts he does not recognize. There is no sense of a nation under siege here. It feels, more than anything, like a machine winding up, not winding down. A sudden shout at the far end of the hall cuts through the noise. A German prisoner has stood up too quickly, his chair scraping back. Two MPs move toward him at once, hands on their holsters, faces tense. For a moment, the whole room holds its breath. Is this where the illusion ends? Is this where the kindness gives way to the iron fist they were promised? Every head turns as the chair skids back. The man who stood is tall and thin, an Obergefreiter with desert dust still ground into the seams of his uniform. His eyes are wild, his tray half finished on the table. One of his hands is clenched around a fork so tightly his knuckles have gone white. For a heartbeat, it feels like Tunisia again, like the moment before an artillery barrage. The mess hall falls into a pocket of silence. The first MP reaches him in 3 long strides. "Sit down," the American orders, voice sharp but controlled. His hand hovers near his holster, but does not draw. The second MP positions himself at an angle, blocking the way to the door. They have rehearsed this hundreds of times. One speaks, one covers, both ready without escalating. The German looks from one to the other, chest heaving. Karl can see sweat shining on the man's forehead. He is not starting a fight, not really. He is a soldier who has been a prisoner for weeks, suddenly confronted with a scene that makes no sense. In rapid, broken English, the Obergefreiter tries to explain. Toilet, he says, gesturing vaguely toward the exit, then at his stomach. One MP flicks a glance at the other. The tension drains from their shoulders almost visibly. "Next time, you raise your hand and ask," the first says, tone still firm. "You don't jump up like that, understand?" The German nods quickly, visibly embarrassed now. One of the MPs jerks his thumb toward the door. "Go! Be back in 5. The man slips past them, his posture suddenly small. The room exhales. Conversation returns in an uneven wave. Forks scrape trays again. Someone laughs nervously. Another prisoner mutters a joke too low for the guards to hear. The moment of potential violence evaporates, leaving behind something quieter and more unsettling. The realization that this system too has rules. The Americans may be generous, but they are not soft. There are lines here, just as there were lines in the Afrika Korps. Step across them, and the easy smiles will vanish. You can almost feel everyone at the table silently filing that lesson away. Karl keeps his eyes on his plate, but his ears are open. At the next table, a pair of GIs talk in low voices. One shakes his head. "Guy jumps up like that, you think he's going to rush somebody," he says. "Still, I'd snap if I came from Rommel's circus too." The other snorts. "Rommel, schmummel, they ain't in North Africa now, they're in Texas. We treat 'em right, they behave, we all go home sooner." The words are simple, almost casual. But then one phrase sticks, "we treat them right." That is not what Karl was taught to expect from enemies. When the Obergefreiter returns, escorted back by one MP, he sits down heavily. The men around him pretend not to stare. His fork rattles against the tray for a moment before he gets it under control. "I thought they would hit me," he admits quietly, in German. "At least once, to show who is master." The older corporal from Bremen shakes his head. "They already showed it," he replies, nodding toward the serving line, the stacked crates, the humming electric lights. "They do not need fists for that." The line lands harder than any blow. Karl looks around with new eyes. Power is everywhere here, but it does not always wear a uniform or shout an order. It is in the thickness of the mashed potatoes, in the cold fizz of the Coca-Cola, in the simple fact that these Americans can afford to give such things to men who were trying to kill them a few weeks ago. What kind of industrial might sits behind this one camp, this one meal? How many factories? How many trains? How many farms? His thoughts drift back to his last days in Africa. The trucks that did not arrive. The artillery shells that never came, the rumors of fuel shortages. He remembers a company commander quietly telling his men to conserve ammunition, not for tactical reasons, but because Berlin cannot send more. He remembers looking at their own thin soup in the field kitchens, at the worn boots patched and repatched. Now, in front of him, the ice cream has already begun to melt into a small white lake on the tray. No one is yelling at him to finish quickly. No one is counting spoons. For the first time, a treacherous thought edges into his mind, one he would never have dared voice back home. Perhaps this war was never truly winnable, not with men alone, not against this. It is not a moral judgment yet, not a political one. It is simply arithmetic written in sugar and cold glass. At the far end of the hall, a bell rings once. Lunch is halfway over. Men begin to talk a little more freely. A few Germans risk halting English phrases with the guards. An American private flips a second crate of Coca-Cola bottles onto the counter, as if the first had been nothing. Somewhere above the rafters, a ceiling fan squeaks rhythmically, stirring the heavy air. You can almost feel the question spreading table to table, unspoken but insistent. If this is how the enemy lives, what does that say about everything we have been fighting for? The worst of the tension has passed, but something has shifted in the room. As the men return to their meals, fragments of conversation drift back and forth in German. They are still prisoners. The wire is still there. The guards still carry pistols. But the certainty they marched into captivity with has taken a hit. It is there in the way they glance at the serving line, at the untouched crates, at the Americans laughing as if the war were a story told about someone else. A lieutenant from a panzer unit sits 2 tables down from Karl, ramrod straight even in captivity. He has been silent through most of the meal, cutting his meat with stiff, measured movements. Now one of his men, a young loader from Munich, leans toward him. "Herr Lieutenant, our rations in Tunisia," the loader begins, picking his words carefully. "They said we were suffering because the fatherland was giving everything to the front, that there was no more to send," he nods subtly toward the overflowing trays. "But this is also the front, is it not?" The lieutenant holds his gaze for a moment. You can almost feel the conflict behind his eyes. His duty is clear: uphold morale, uphold the line, even now. Yet the evidence is sitting on the table between them, cold and sweet and undeniable. "America is large," he says at last, choosing the safest possible ground. "They have more land, more factories. Our people endure more because we stand alone." He sounds like a leaflet, and he knows it. The loader nods, but his expression says he is not convinced. The crack has appeared. It will not close again. An American chaplain walks slowly between the tables, hands folded behind his back. He does not preach, does not lecture. He simply observes, offering a quiet word here and there to his own men. When he passes Karl's table, he notices the crumpled photograph Karl keeps touching in his pocket. For a moment, their eyes meet. The chaplain gives the smallest nod of recognition, not to a German, not to an enemy, but to a young man who has someone waiting far away. Then he moves on. It is a tiny gesture, and yet it cuts through layers of slogans and posters more cleanly than any argument. Enemies can still be human. Near the door, a notice board is tacked with printed regulations in German and English. Work details, camp rules, a copy of the Geneva Convention articles relating to prisoners of war. The paper is crisp, the ink fresh. One of the POWs, a former law student from Hamburg, stands reading it line by line, lips moving soundlessly. "We studied this once," he murmurs to the man beside him. "We did not think anyone would actually follow it." His friend snorts. "We did not think anyone would be on this side of it," he replies, "but there is no bitterness in it. Only a new, wary curiosity." Back at the table, the last of the ice cream has turned into a pale puddle. Karl dips his spoon through it, almost absent-mindedly. His thoughts are far away now, moving faster than his hand. He imagines his mother standing in line for bread back home, ration card in hand. He imagines the blacked-out streets, the air raid sirens, the warnings on the radio about Terrorangriff, terror raids. For the first time, he asks himself a dangerous question. If the war continues like this, and if these Americans have this much for prisoners, what will they be able to bring against German cities? Against families like his? The bell rings again, sharper this time. Lunch is over, benches scrape, trays are collected. The mess hall begins to empty, the orderlies moving quickly to clear tables for the next group. Outside, the Texas sun waits, bright and remorseless. As they file toward the door, each prisoner carries something different away from the meal. Some carry only a full stomach. Others carry a new unease. Karl carries both and something more. The first faint suspicion that strength might not look like what he has always been told. Just before he steps out into the glare, he glances back over his shoulder. He sees an American cook casually open yet another crate of bottles, as if supplies were endless. The image lodges in his mind: glass, ice, abundance. He has no idea yet that months from now, when the first rumors of burned-out German cities reach the camp, it will be this memory that comes back to haunt him. And when it does, the question he is afraid to ask now will demand an answer. Weeks pass. The memory of that first mess hall lunch does not fade. It becomes a reference point. Work details to nearby farms and factories begin. Each morning, under a clear Texas sky, columns of German POWs march out past fields dotted with machinery they could only dream of in Europe. Tractors, harvesters, trucks lined up with full fuel tanks. You can almost feel the imbalance in every passing vehicle. The guards keep count, but there is an easy rhythm to the routine now. No one goes hungry. The mess hall remains the beating heart of the camp. Meals arrive on time, 3 times a day. Sometimes there is meatloaf, sometimes stew, sometimes something called cornbread that crumbles in the hand and tastes of butter and salt. The ice cream is not every day, but it appears often enough to never feel like a miracle again. Coca-Cola comes and goes in crates. To the Americans, it is just logistics. To the prisoners, it is a daily reminder that this country has margin. Enough extra to waste a little, enough to be generous without thinking about it. Then, slowly, another kind of abundance begins to seep in: information. It starts with overheard fragments, American guards talking about Stalingrad as a turning point. A Texan MP mentioning how his brother is somewhere in Sicily now. An offhand comment from a cook: "Did you hear about Hamburg? Lit up the whole sky." The words hang heavy in the air over the serving line. Hamburg, lit up. Carl's spoon pauses halfway to his mouth. Hamburg is not a distant name on a map. It is a train stop, away from Cologne. It is part of home. One evening after roll call, a group of prisoners gathers near the fence where the Camp S loudspeakers carry an American news broadcast. The English washes over them in waves, but a few words are clear enough. Massive Allied bombing, German cities, industrial centers, heavy damage reported. Beside Karl, the law student from Hamburg translates in a low voice, picking sentences out of the static. His own home is underlined in every phrase. His jaw tightens, but he does not stop listening. You can almost hear the room from the mess hall echoing in his head, the full plates, the cold drinks, now laid against images of burning streets thousands of miles away. The next day at lunch, the atmosphere is different, the food is the same, the trays are just as heavy, but conversation is quieter. A man from the Ruhr stares at his steak, then pushes it aside. "My wife has not seen meat in weeks," he says softly. "Not like this." No one answers. What would you say? That you are sorry? That you wish the enemy would feed your family as well as it feeds you? The thought is almost unbearable. The abundance in front of them, once just surprising, now feels like an accusation. Karl feels the tension inside him split in 2 directions. On one side, there is gratitude, even a guilty relief. He is safe, fed, far from the front. On the other, there is a rising fear for the people under those bombers, for his parents in Cologne, for everyone still living by candlelight and ration cards. He glances at the American map on the wall again, at the colored pins inching toward the heart of Europe. The officers used to tell them that willpower and discipline could overcome any material disadvantage. But what happens when the imbalance is this large, when the side with the ice cream and Coca-Cola also controls the skies above your home? That night, back in the barracks, someone smuggles in an American newspaper page torn from a trash can. The headline screams of "Fires over Hamburg." There is a grainy photograph of smoke rising over a broken skyline. As the men pass the page from bunk to bunk, Karl feels the wooden boards under him, remembers the cool glass of the Coca-Cola bottle in his hand, and realizes these are not separate worlds. They are the same war, seen from 2 opposite ends of the supply chain. One of the older prisoners folds the paper carefully and sets it under his mattress, as if he can hide reality by hiding the page. Then he looks up at the dim barracks light and says, in a voice that carries to every corner, "If they can do that to Hamburg and still feed us like this, what will be left of Germany when we go home?" Autumn creeps into Texas almost without anyone noticing. The days are still hot, but the nights grow cooler and a thin wind starts to whistle through the gaps in the barracks walls. The routine in the camp settles into something that feels dangerously like normal life. Work, roll call, mess, lights out. In the mess hall, the meals remain steady, like clockwork. Only the news on the notice board and the fragments of radio broadcasts mark the war's progress. Sicily, Salerno, Rome, then whispers of something larger in France. One morning, just after the men file in for lunch, a camp clerk appears at the doorway holding a small bundle of envelopes. His voice carries over the clatter of trays as he reads out names. Mail from home. Heads snap up. Benches creak as men twist to listen. Each name is a small miracle, a proof that someone has remembered them across an ocean and a war. When the clerk says, Gefreiter Karl Weber, it takes a moment for Karl to react. For a heartbeat, he just stares, as if the sound has come from someone else's life. Then he stands, feeling every eye on him, and steps forward to take the thin envelope from the clerk's hand. Back at the table, he does not open it right away. His fingers run over the familiar handwriting on the front. His mother's, shaky but determined. The smell of lunch is all around him. Gravy, coffee, a hint of something fried. The ice clinks in the big metal tubs of water near the serving line. It is a strange setting for what might be the most important few sentences he will read in years. He slips a thumb under the flap and tears it open with slow care, as if the paper might break. The letter is short. It has to be. Space is limited, and censors on both sides will have handled it. His mother writes of small things, the line at the bakery getting longer. A neighbor's son reported missing near Kursk, the sound of sirens at night. She does not describe the raids in detail, but the gaps between her words are full of things she will not put on paper. We are well, she writes. We have enough to eat most days. Most days. The phrase sits on the page like a stone. Karl looks down at his tray. Today there is meat, potatoes, a roll, even a thin slice of something like cake. Most days here means something completely different. Then, near the bottom of the page, one sentence makes his breath catch. We heard there are German prisoners in America, she writes. They say you are treated correctly. Some say even generously. I hope this is true, though I cannot imagine it. Karl's hand tightens around the paper. He can almost hear her voice, baffled by the idea that her son might be better fed in the enemy's hands than his own parents are at home. How would he explain this room to her? The steady meals, the cold drinks, the clean benches? How do you tell your mother that the enemy gives you ice cream while she stands under air raid sirens? He reaches for his bottle of Coca-Cola, almost without thinking, then stops halfway. The glass is cold, beaded with condensation. He sets it down again. Around him, the others eat, talk, laugh a little, unaware of the storm in his head. The letter has not accused him of anything. It has not demanded explanations. It has only laid two realities side by side, her most days and his. And in that space, something in his faith in the war effort, in the promises he grew up with, begins to quietly unravel. He folds the letter carefully and tucks it back into its envelope, then into his pocket, next to the photograph of the shop in Cologne. Two thin pieces of paper carrying two different worlds. Outside, through the high mess hall windows, the Texas sky is wide and clear, unmarred by smoke. Inside, under bright electric bulbs, the lunch line moves forward, unbroken. As Karl lifts his spoon again, one thought pulses at the back of his mind, heavier now, harder to push away. If this is how America treats its prisoners, what will it bring to bear when it finally reaches Germany itself? By the summer of 1944, even in Texas, the war feels closer. Names like Normandy and Caen drift through the camp on radio static and rumor. A guard mentions, Paris is free now, as casually as someone might talk about the weather. The colored pins on the mess hall map inch across France and into Germany. Nobody explains it to the prisoners officially, but the pattern is impossible to miss. Front lines that were once straight now bow inward toward the heart of Europe, toward cities whose names are etched into the men's memories. In the mess hall, the food does not change much. There is still meat, potatoes, bread, sometimes eggs, sometimes cake. There are still days when ice cream appears, the big cans dragged out of the freezers, the metal scoop ringing against the sides. Coca-Cola crates continue to arrive, their glass bottles clinking as they are unpacked and stacked. But the way Karl and the others see it has changed. It is no longer just strange or generous. It is evidence. Proof that even while bombing Hamburg, Cologne, Dresden, the factories churning out these supplies have barely broken stride. You can almost feel the scale every time a GI says, "We got plenty more out back." When winter comes and word of the Ardennes reaches them, the bulge, the surprise counterattack, some of the older, more hardline prisoners allow themselves a flicker of hope. Maybe Germany can still pull off a miracle. Maybe the enemy is not as strong as it looks, but then, weeks later, more news trickles in. The counterattack has failed. American troops have crossed the Rhine. Photographs in American newspapers show GIs posing on destroyed German bridges, smiling at the camera. Those papers too end up in the camp trash. Those papers too are quietly retrieved, smoothed out, and studied at the barracks tables by men who recognize the street signs in the background. By early 1945, the psychological distance between the mess hall and home has shrunk to almost nothing. New prisoners arrive from Europe, captured in France, in Belgium, in the last crumbling defenses of the Reich. They are thin, hollow-eyed, uniforms threadbare. When they see the food line for the first time, the shock on their faces is exactly what Karl remembers feeling months earlier. They whisper the old slogans about decadent America and starving capitalists. But the words sound weak, even to their own ears. The older POWs, the ones who have been here longest, simply watch. They have already fought this internal battle. They know how it ends. One evening, after a particularly quiet meal, Karl sits at the table with his tray empty, except for a damp ring where his soda bottle had stood. In his pocket, 2 letters now share the space with the photograph of the shop in Cologne. The most recent one spoke of bomb damage, of neighbors gone, of a church roof blown away. His mother still writes, "We are well," but the handwriting has grown shakier. She asks again about his treatment, about whether the rumors of Coca-Cola and American chocolate in the camps can really be true. He has no idea how to answer without sounding like he is boasting or betraying. He thinks back to the first time he tasted ice cream here. The disbelief, the anger at the unfairness, the slow, reluctant admiration. Over months, that single moment has come to stand for something much larger. The realization that wars are not won by slogans or even by courage alone, but by steel, wheat, oil, and the ability to move them where they are needed without running dry. The Americans, with their full mess halls and endless bottles, have shown him that more clearly than any battlefield ever could. When Germany finally surrenders in May 1945, there are no celebrations in the camp. No cheering, no flags. Just a heavy, complicated silence that settles over the barracks like dust. Some men cry, some stare at the floor, some stare at the horizon, as if they might see all the way to the ruins of their hometowns. In the mess hall that day, the food is the same as always. The cooks work the same shift. The crates of Coca-Cola are opened with the same casual motion. The machine does not pause for victory. It simply keeps feeding people. Months later, as repatriation begins and the POWs are processed for return, Karl takes one last look at the mess hall. The wooden tables, the scuffed floorboards, the serving line with its deep metal trays. He can still smell coffee and steam and the faint sweetness of melted ice cream. He knows that when he steps onto the ship home, he will be leaving not just a camp, but a glimpse of another world, a world where abundance is used not only to arm soldiers, but to feed prisoners. A world that, in his quietest moments, he will have to admit, proved stronger than everything he was raised to believe. Years from now, when people ask him how he knew Germany could not win, he will not talk first about tanks or aircraft or famous battles. He will remember instead the weight of a metal tray in his hands, the cold shock of a Coca-Cola bottle, the sight of an American cook dropping a casual scoop of ice cream onto a prisoner S-plate. He will remember how that simple act made all the speeches and posters fall silent. And he will understand that sometimes the most brutal truth about a war is revealed not on a battlefield, but in a mess hall, under bright electric lights, with the quiet clink of glass on wood.